I still remember standing at that altar in my perfectly pressed tuxedo, watching my fiancée Jennifer walk down the aisle toward me. What I didn't expect was for her to stop halfway, turn around, and run straight into the arms of her ex-boyfriend Robert, who had just burst through the church doors. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming as I stood there humiliated in front of 200 guests. Jennifer's younger sister Melissa quietly slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "Let's get out of here." That moment of betrayal and an unexpected alliance would lead me on a journey I never could have imagined. From building $1 million construction empire together to returning years later as the most successful power couple in town. This is the story of how the worst day of my life became the beginning of everything I never knew I wanted. Sometimes the person meant for you is standing right next to the one who breaks your heart. Sometimes it takes public humiliation to find your true destiny. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is James Martin, and 3 years ago, I genuinely believed I had my entire future mapped out perfectly. I was 28 years old, living in the charming suburban town of Brookhaven. Working as a senior project manager at Pinnacle Construction, one of the area's most respected building companies, life felt stable, predictable, and exactly where I wanted it to be. I'd been with Jennifer Collins for 4 incredible years, and engaged for 8 months that felt like a beautiful countdown to forever. Jennifer was everything I thought I wanted in a life partner, absolutely stunning with her long blonde hair and bright blue eyes, vivacious and outgoing, the kind of woman who could light up any room she entered. She worked as a marketing coordinator for TechFlow Solutions, a rapidly growing software startup downtown. And everyone who met us always commented on what a perfect couple. We made our relationship. It started during my final year at Brookhaven University. I was studying construction management while Jennifer was finishing her business degree. We met at a mutual friends party, and I was immediately captivated by her confidence and infectious laugh. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special, and when she focused that attention on me, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Jennifer was the social butterfly in our relationship. She organized our weekend plans, maintained our social calendar, and effortlessly navigated the complex web of friendships and acquaintances that seemed to surround her everywhere we went. I was more of the steady, reliable type, the one who handled practical matters, remembered important dates, and made sure our bills were paid on time. We balanced each other perfectly, or so I thought. I'd spent nearly 2 years saving for her engagement ring, working overtime and taking on weekend freelance projects to afford the 2-carat diamond solitaire that sparkled in the window of Morrison's fine jewelry. When I finally proposed on the beach at Sunset Cove during a romantic weekend getaway, Jennifer's reaction was everything I'd dreamed of. She cried, she laughed. She called her entire family right there on the sand to share the news. The 8 months of wedding planning that followed were a whirlwind of decisions, deposits, and dreams. Jennifer threw herself into every detail with characteristic enthusiasm. We'd chosen St. Michael's Cathedral for the ceremony, a magnificent stone church with soaring spires and beautiful stained glass windows that had hosted Brookhaven's most elegant weddings for over a century. The reception was planned for the grand ballroom at the East Side Country Club, complete with a live band, gourmet catering, and flowers that cost more than my first car. Our guest list had grown to 200 people, including extended family, college friends, work colleagues, and what seemed like half of Brookhaven's social scene. Jennifer insisted that this would be the wedding everyone would remember, the standard by which all future weddings would be measured. I happily went along with her vision, even though the mounting expenses were stretching my finances to their absolute limit. I'd taken on extra freelance projects throughout our engagement, managing small residential renovations on weekends and evenings to help cover the wedding costs. The stress was exhausting, but every time I saw Jennifer's excitement about our big day, it felt worth it. This was our investment in our future together. The foundation of the life we were building. Our honeymoon was planned for 2 weeks in Tuscany, Jennifer's dream destination. She'd spent hours researching vineyards, booking cooking classes, was planning romantic excursions through the Italian countryside. We had reservations at boutique hotels, tickets for art museums, and a carefully crafted itinerary that would give us stories to tell for the rest of our lives. Beyond the wedding, we'd been making serious plans for our future. We'd already put a deposit down on a beautiful colonial house in Maplewood, Brookhaven's most desirable neighborhood. The house had 4 bedrooms, a large backyard perfect for the family we planned to start, and a 2-car garage where I could set up a workshop for my woodworking hobby. We'd spent countless evenings driving through the neighborhood, imagining our future selves walking our future kids to the excellent schools, hosting dinner parties in our spacious dining room, and growing old together on the wraparound front porch. I felt incredibly blessed. At 28, I had a career I enjoyed, a woman I adored, and a clear vision of the life we were building together. My parents, Richard and Carol Martin, absolutely loved Jennifer and frequently commented on how proud they were of the man I'd become. Jennifer's family had welcomed me warmly as well. Her parents, Michael and Patricia Collins, treated me like the son they'd never had. The only family member I'd never really connected with was Jennifer's younger sister. Was 25, quieter, and more reserved than Jennifer, with an understated elegance that often got overshadowed by her sister's more dramatic personality. Melissa worked as a financial analyst at Brookhaven Investment Group and lived alone in a small, but tastefully decorated apartment downtown. She was always perfectly polite to me, but there was something distant about her that I'd never been able to bridge. During family gatherings, while Jennifer would be the center of attention with her animated stories and infectious laughter, Melissa would usually find a quiet corner with a book or engage in one-on-one conversations with older relatives. I'd always assumed she was just naturally introverted, and since Jennifer kept me plenty busy with her active social life, I'd never made much effort to get to know Melissa better. Looking back now, I realize how narrow my vision had become. And my life revolved around Jennifer and our shared plans. My identity was so wrapped up in being her fiancée that I'd stopped thinking about who I was as an individual. I'd become comfortable, maybe even complacent, assuming that the future we'd planned together was guaranteed. The morning of our wedding, as I stood in front of the mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting my bow tie for the 100th time, I felt a mixture of nervousness and pure excitement. This was it, the day I'd been working toward for months, the beginning of the rest of my life with the woman I loved. I had no idea that in just a few hours, everything I believed about love, loyalty, and my future would be completely shattered, and that the quiet sister I'd barely noticed would become the most important person in my world. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock sharp on that. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon in late September. St. Michael's Cathedral looked absolutely magnificent, exactly as Jennifer had envisioned it. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone walls and wooden pews. The altar was adorned with cascading arrangements of white roses, baby's breath, and eucalyptus that filled the air with their sweet fragrance. I stood at the front of the cathedral with my best man, Stanley Green, my college roommate and closest friend. Stanley had been trying to keep me calm all morning, cracking jokes and reminding me to breathe deeply. "This is it, buddy," he whispered as we took our positions. "You're about to marry the woman of your dreams." The pews were filled with exactly the crowd Jennifer had wanted, 200 of our closest family members and friends, all dressed in their finest attire. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, my father beaming with pride. Across the aisle, Michael and Patricia Collins looked equally emotional, Tricia clutching her husband's arm as they waited for their eldest daughter to appear. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, and a hush fell over the congregation. This was the moment we'd all been waiting for. The massive wooden doors at the back of the cathedral remained closed, and I felt my heart racing with anticipation. In just moments, I would see Jennifer in her wedding dress for the first time, and we would begin the ceremony that would bind us together for life. 4 o'clock came and went. The music continued, but there was no sign of Jennifer. I glanced at Stanley, who gave me an encouraging nod. "Brides are always a few minutes late," he whispered. It's tradition. By 4:10, I could hear murmuring from the congregation. People were starting to shift in their seats, checking their watches, and exchanging concerned glances. Father Mackenzie, the priest who was officiating our ceremony, gave me a reassuring smile and gestured for patience. At 4:15, my stomach began to knot with genuine worry. This wasn't like Jennifer. She was actually usually early to important events, and she'd been so excited about this moment that I couldn't imagine her being late by choice. I caught my mother's eye and she gave me a supportive thumbs up, but I could see the concern creeping into her expression as well. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Finally, at 4:22, the doors at the back of the cathedral slowly opened. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the congregation, and I felt my shoulders relax as the familiar wedding march began to play. The first to appear were Jennifer's bridesmaids, 3 of her closest friends, and her sister Melissa, all wearing the elegant lavender dresses Jennifer had chosen months ago. Melissa looked absolutely beautiful as she walked down the aisle. Her chestnut brown hair elegantly styled and her bouquet of white lilies complementing her dress perfectly. She caught my eye as she approached the altar and gave me a warm, encouraging smile that somehow made me feel more confident about the moment ahead. Then, finally, there was Jennifer. Even from the back of the cathedral, she looked absolutely radiant. Her wedding dress was everything she'd dreamed of. A stunning, aligned gown with intricate lace detailing and a cathedral-length train that seemed to float behind her as she began walking down the aisle with her father. Her veil was perfectly positioned, and she carried the elaborate bouquet of white roses and peonies that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. The congregation rose to their feet, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was really happening. After 4 years together and 8 months of intensive planning, Jennifer and I were finally getting married. She looked like something out of a fairy tale, and I couldn't believe how lucky I was to be the man waiting for her at the PA altar. But as Jennifer walked closer, I began to notice something wrong. Her pace seemed hesitant, almost reluctant. Instead of the radiant smile I'd expected to see, her face looked pale and uncertain. She kept glancing around the cathedral as if she were looking for something or someone. About halfway down the aisle, Jennifer's steps began to slow significantly. Her father, Michael, gently squeezed her arm and whispered something encouraging. But Jennifer's expression only grew more troubled. The beautiful wedding march continued playing, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't understand. Suddenly, Jennifer stopped walking entirely. She stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, about 20 feet from where I waited. The music faltered as the string quartet realized something was happening. A confused murmur began to spread through the congregation. "Jennifer," I called out softly, taking a step toward her. "Are you okay?" But Jennifer wasn't looking at me. She was staring at something behind me, near the side entrance of the cathedral. I turned to follow her gaze, and my blood ran absolutely cold. Standing in the doorway, looking as stunned as everyone else, was Robert White, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend from college. The man she'd dated for 3 intense years before we met. The relationship that had ended, according to Jennifer, because they wanted different things and realized they weren't compatible long-term. Robert looked exactly as I remembered him. From the few photos I'd seen, tall, athletic, with dark hair and the kind of confident bearing that had probably made him popular in college. He was wearing a dark suit but not wedding attire, as if he'd just happened to stumble upon our ceremony. The cathedral had gone completely silent except for the sound of people shifting in their seats and the faint echo of footsteps as Robert slowly walked into the church. Jennifer's bouquet began trembling in her hands, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Robert?" Jennifer's voice was barely audible, but in the silence of the cathedral, everyone heard it. "I'm sorry," Robert called out, his voice carrying across the stone walls. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I was driving by and saw all the cars, and I just ... I had to see if it was really you. What happened next will be burned into my memory forever." Jennifer looked at Robert, then at me, then back at Robert. Her beautiful bouquet slipped from her hands and crashed to the marble floor, white roses and peonies scattering across the aisle. "I can't do this," Jennifer whispered, but her voice carried in the stunned silence. "I thought I could, but seeing you again, Robert... I realized I never stopped loving you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the cathedral. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of nightmare that I would wake up from any moment. But it wasn't a nightmare. In front of 200 guests, in front of our families and friends, in front of God and everyone we knew, Jennifer picked up her dress and ran. Not toward me, not toward the altar where I stood waiting, but straight into Robert White's arms. The cathedral erupted in gasps, shocked whispers, and the sound of people getting to their feet. I heard my mother cry out behind me, heard Jennifer's mother sobbing, heard the confused voices of 200 people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. I stood there paralyzed, watching as Jennifer threw herself into Robert's arms, like she was the heroine of some romantic movie and he was her rescuing hero. They held each other tightly, and I could see both of them crying as they embraced. "Jennifer." I finally found my voice, though it came out cracked and desperate. "Are you doing? We're getting married?" She turned back to me, tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup now smudged and ruined. "James, I'm so sorry. I thought I was over him, but I'm not. I can't marry you when my heart belongs to someone else. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." The humiliation was absolutely crushing. 200 people were staring at me, pitying me, watching me get abandoned at my own wedding. I could feel their eyes boring into me, could hear their whispered conversations, could sense their discomfort and secondhand embarrassment. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it had become the most humiliating moment I could possibly imagine, standing there in my perfectly pressed tuxedo, holding my breath, watching the woman I loved choose someone else in front of everyone. We knew it felt like the end of my world. The next few moments felt like they were happening in slow motion, yet somehow too fast for my brain to process. I stood frozen at the altar, my mind desperately trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. This had to be some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding that could be explained away. Jennifer couldn't possibly be throwing away for years of our relationship, 8 months of wedding planning, and our entire future together for a man who had just randomly appeared at our ceremony. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself, barely aware that I was speaking out loud. "This can't be happening." But the evidence was right there in front of me. Jennifer and Robert were still embracing in the middle of the aisle, both of them, crying and whispering to each other as if they were the only 2 people in the cathedral. The scattered white roses from Jennifer's bouquet lay around their feet like fallen snow. Beautiful symbol now turned into debris from a disaster. The congregation had erupted into chaos. People were standing up, talking loudly, pointing, and trying to figure out what they should do. Some guests were attempting to leave discreetly, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing such a private moment of humiliation. Others seemed transfixed by the drama, unable to look away from the spectacle unfolding before them. I could hear my mother sobbing behind me. And when I turned around, I saw my father with his arm around her shoulders, his face a mixture of anger and heartbreak on my behalf. "That girl," my mother was saying through her tears, "how could she do this to our James? How could she humiliate him like this?" Across the aisle, Jennifer's parents looked absolutely mortified. Patricia Collins had her hands covering her face, and Michael was staring at his eldest daughter with an expression of complete shock and disappointment. This wasn't just devastating for me, it was humiliating for both of our families who had invested so much time, money, and emotion into this day. Stanley, that's my best man, was standing beside me looking completely helpless. "James, man, I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I don't know what to say. This is insane." Father Mackenzie, who had officiated dozens of weddings at St. Michael's over his 30-year career, looked as stunned as everyone else. Approached me cautiously, his voice gentle but uncertain. "Son, perhaps we should dismiss the congregation and give everyone some time too." But I couldn't focus on his words. All I could think about was how everything I'd believed about my life, my relationship, and my future had just been revealed as a lie. Jennifer had been planning to marry me today. She'd spent months choosing flowers, tasting cakes, addressing invitations, and talking about our honeymoon in Tuscany. How could she suddenly decide she was still in love with someone else? She said she was over him, I said, more to myself than to anyone else. She told me she never wanted to see him again. She said what we had was real. What we had was real. The questions were spinning through my mind faster than I could process them. How long had Jennifer been having doubts? Had she been thinking about Robert throughout our entire engagement? Had she been lying to me for months, going through the motions of planning our wedding while secretly wishing she was with someone else? I felt like I was drowning in front of 200 people. Every eye in the cathedral was on me, measuring my reaction, pitying me, or maybe even judging me. Was this somehow my fault? Had I failed as a partner? Was I not enough for Jennifer? Had I been so blind to her true feelings that I'd forced her into a situation where she felt she had to run away on our wedding day? The financial devastation hit me next. I'd spent nearly every penny I had on this wedding and our planned future together. The ceremony, the reception, the honeymoon, the deposit on our house, it was all gone. Worse than gone, because I would still be responsible for paying for a wedding that didn't happen, honeymoon we wouldn't take, and a house we would never share. Jennifer, I called out again, my voice stronger this time. Maybe if I could just talk to her, I could understand what was happening. Maybe this was some kind of panic attack or momentary confusion that we could work through. She looked up from Robert's arms, her face streaked with tears and mascara. For a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman who used to look at me like I was her entire world. "James, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. I never meant for this to happen. I thought I could go through with it, but seeing Robert again made me realize that I've been lying to myself. I've been trying so hard to convince myself that what we had was enough, but it's not fair to either of us. It's not fair. The words came out harsher than I intended. What's not fair is humiliating me in front of everyone we know, instead of having this conversation before today. What's not fair is letting me spend every penny I had on a wedding you apparently never wanted. Jennifer flinched at my words, but Robert stepped protectively in front of her. "Look, I know this is a difficult situation," he said, his voice carrying that same confident tone I remembered from college. "But Jennifer and I have a history that never really ended. Sometimes you have to follow your heart, even when the timing isn't perfect." The condescending tone in his voice made my anger flare. Here was a man who had just destroyed my life, and he was talking to me like I should be grateful for his wisdom about following hearts and timing. "You have no right," I started to say, but then I felt a gentle touch on my arm. "James." The voice was soft but steady, cutting through all the chaos and noise around us. I turned to see Melissa Adams standing beside me, still in her lavender bridesmaid dress, her bouquet clutched in her hands. While everyone else in the cathedral was staring at the dramatic scene in the aisle, Melissa was looking directly at me with an expression of genuine concern and quiet strength. "Don't do this here," she said quietly. Her words meant only for me. "Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. You're better than this situation, and you deserve better than being part of this circus." Looked into Melissa's warm brown eyes and saw something I desperately needed in that moment, someone who was on my side. While Jennifer was choosing her ex-boyfriend over me, while 200 people were watching my humiliation, while my entire world was crumbling around me, Melissa was standing beside me with unwavering support. "I don't understand any of this," I admitted to her, my voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I," Melissa replied. "What my sister is doing is cruel and selfish. But standing here trying to reason with her isn't going to change anything. She's made her choice, and now you need to make yours." I looked back at Jennifer and Robert, who were now talking quietly with Jennifer's parents, apparently making plans for their dramatic exit. The woman I'd planned to spend my life with was already moving on, already making decisions about her future that didn't include me. "What choice do I have?" I asked Melissa. "You can choose to walk out of here with your dignity intact," she said. Firmly, "You can choose not to let this define you. You can choose to let the people who care about you help you through this." For the first time since Robert had walked into the cathedral, I felt like I could breathe. Melissa was right. Standing here begging Jennifer to reconsider or trying to make sense of her betrayal wasn't going to accomplish anything except prolonging my humiliation. "Will you... I started to ask, then stopped, not sure how to finish the question. "Yes," Melissa said immediately, understanding what I couldn't quite put into words. "I'll walk out with you. You shouldn't have to face this alone." Looking around the cathedral one last time at the flowers that would never celebrate our union, at the guests who had come to witness our happiness and instead seen my devastation, at the altar where I'd expected to begin my married life, I made the decision that would change everything. I was done being a victim in this situation. It was time to take control of what happened next. Taking a deep breath, I looked directly at Melissa and nodded. "You're right. Let's go." The decision felt both monumental and surprisingly simple. I could continue standing there like a fool, begging Jennifer to reconsider or demanding explanations that wouldn't change anything. Or I could choose to leave with whatever dignity I had left. Melissa's steady presence beside me made the choice clear. "Are you sure?" Melissa asked quietly, searching my face. "Once we walk out those doors, there's no going back to try to fix this." "There's nothing left to fix," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. She made her choice. Now, I'm making mine. Melissa nodded and gently took my arm. "Then let's walk out of here together." As we turned to leave, I caught Stanley's confused expression. My best man looked torn between following us and staying to deal with the chaos Jennifer had created. "James, wait," he called out. "What do you want me to do about?" He gestured helplessly at the cathedral full of confused guests. "Tell everyone the wedding is canceled," I said simply. "Tell them to go home." Father Mackenzie approached us as we began walking down the aisle. "Son, perhaps you'd like a few minutes to collect yourself in the vestry?" This is a shock, but sometimes these situations can be worked through with prayer and counseling. I appreciated his kindness, but I shook my head. "Thank you, Father, but I think the situation is pretty clear. There's nothing to work through here." As Melissa and I began our walk down the aisle together, the cathedral fell into an eerie quiet. 200 pairs of eyes followed our every step, but instead of the joyful celebration that should have accompanied my exit from this church, there was only uncomfortable silence punctuated by whispered conversations and the soft sound of our footsteps on the marble floor. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, their pity, their curiosity about what I would do next. Some faces showed genuine sympathy. My college friends, my coworkers, family members who knew how much I'd loved Jennifer. Others seemed almost entertained by the drama, as if they were watching some kind of performance rather than the destruction of a real person's life. My parents started to follow us, but I turned and shook my head slightly. "I need some time," I said quietly as we passed their pew. My mother reached out and squeezed my hand briefly, tears streaming down her face. "We love you, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're so proud of how you're handling this." Behind us, I could hear Jennifer's voice rising as she apparently tried to address the congregation. "I'm sorry everyone had to see this," she was saying, her voice thick with tears. "I never meant for it to happen this way, but sometimes you have to follow your heart, even when it's difficult." The words made my jaw clench, but Melissa squeezed my arm gently, keeping me focused on moving forward rather than turning around to respond to Jennifer's self-serving explanation. Even in the midst of humiliating me, she was painting herself as some kind of romantic heroine following her true love. "Don't listen to her," Melissa murmured as we continued walking. "She's just trying to make herself feel better about what she's done." As we approached the back of the cathedral, I could see Robert and Jennifer's parents engaged in what appeared to be a heated, whispered conversation near the side entrance. Michael Collins looked absolutely furious, while Patricia was still crying and seemed to be pleading with Jennifer about something. Robert stood protectively close to Jennifer, his hand on her back as if he were already her husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jennifer's parents would welcome me into their family and spent thousands of dollars on this wedding, were now dealing with the aftermath of their daughter's impulsive decision. They had invested just as much in our relationship as I had, emotionally and financially. Finally, we reached the massive wooden doors at the back of St. Michael's Cathedral. It's the same doors I had walked through an hour ago as an excited groom-to-be. Full of hope and anticipation for the life Jennifer and I were about to begin together, I was leaving as a publicly humiliated man whose entire future had just been destroyed. As we stepped outside into the late afternoon sunshine, the contrast was jarring. It was still the same beautiful September day, with a gentle breeze and clear blue skies that had seemed like perfect wedding weather just hours ago. The world hadn't changed, only my place in it had been completely upended. The cathedral steps were lined with white rose petals that had been scattered for Jennifer and me to walk through as newlyweds. Instead, I was walking through them with her sister as a rejected groom. Melissa felt almost cruel. Melissa and I stood on the steps for a moment, both of us breathing heavily as the magnitude of what had just happened began to sink in. Behind us, we could hear the muffled chaos continuing inside the cathedral, raised voices, crying, and the general confusion of 200 people trying to figure out what they were supposed to do now. "I can't believe she actually did that," Melissa said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I mean, I knew Jennifer could be impulsive, but this is beyond anything I ever imagined her capable of." I looked at Melissa, really looked at her for perhaps the first time in the 4 years I'd known her. She was still holding her bridesmaid bouquet, her chestnut hair slightly mussed from the chaos in the cathedral, her warm brown eyes filled with genuine concern for me. While her sister had just destroyed my life in front of everyone we knew, Melissa had chosen to stand by my side. "Why?" I asked her. "Why are you doing this? She's your sister. Shouldn't you be with her?" Melissa's expression hardened slightly. "What Jennifer did in there was cruel and selfish. It's the fact that she's my sister doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean I have to support her when she's wrong." She paused, looking back at the cathedral doors. "You deserved so much better than that, James. You deserved honesty, respect, and basic human decency. She gave you none of those things." Her words were like a balm to my wounded pride. For the first time since Robert had walked into the cathedral, felt like someone truly understood the magnitude of what Jennifer had done to me. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," I admitted. "Everything I planned, everything I worked for, it was all built around a future with her. The house, the honeymoon, even my job. I stayed at Pinnacle because it offered the stability I thought we needed for our life together. Right now, you don't have to figure out everything," Melissa said gently. "Right now, you just need to get through today. Tomorrow, you can start thinking about what comes next." In the distance, I could see wedding guests beginning to emerge from the cathedral, clearly having given up on waiting for some kind of resolution. They gathered in small groups on the steps and sidewalk, talking quietly among themselves and shooting curious glances in our direction. "I should probably go home," I said, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I can't deal with answering questions and accepting condolences from everyone." "You're not going home alone," Melissa said firmly. "Not today. Let me drive you, or at least stay with you for a while. No one should have to process something like this by themselves." I started to protest that she didn't need to take care of me, but the truth was, I desperately didn't want to be alone. The thought of sitting in my apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts and reminders of the future that had just been stolen from me, felt unbearable. "Okay," I said quietly. "Thank you, Melissa. I don't know what I would have done without you in there." As we walked toward the parking area where my car was waiting, I realized that this was the beginning of something entirely new and unknown. An hour ago, I had been James Martin, the groom. I was James Martin, the man whose fiancée had left him at the altar. But walking beside me was someone who had chosen loyalty and kindness over family obligation and social expectation. I didn't know it yet, but Melissa Adams was about to become the most important person in my life. The first week after the wedding disaster was the longest of my entire life. I'd taken emergency leave from Pinnacle Construction, telling my boss that I needed time to deal with personal circumstances. The story had already spread throughout Brookhaven like wildfire in a town of 30,000 people. A dramatic altar abandonment was the kind of gossip that traveled fast and lingered. Long Melissa had driven me home from the cathedral that Saturday afternoon, and what I discovered waiting for me was almost as devastating as the ceremony itself. My apartment was filled with wedding gifts that needed to be returned, cards from people congratulating us on our upcoming marriage, and reminders of Jennifer everywhere I looked. The refrigerator was covered with wedding planning notes, vendor contact information, and photos of us from our engagement party just 2 months earlier. "We need to deal with the practical stuff first," Melissa had said gently, surveying the chaos of my life, one thing at a time, so it doesn't feel overwhelming. She was right, but everything felt overwhelming anyway. The honeymoon to Tuscany needed to be canceled, and most of it was non-refundable. The reception at Eastside Country Club had been paid for in full, and while they expressed sympathy for my situation, their contract was clear: no refunds for cancellations within 2 weeks of the event. The flowers, the photographer, the band, the catering, thousands of dollars down. The drain for a celebration that had lasted exactly 22 minutes. How much? Melissa asked quietly as we sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of vendor contracts. "Almost $18,000, I said, my voice hollow. $18,000 for the worst day of my life. The financial blow was staggering. I'd spent nearly 2 years saving for this wedding, working overtime and taking on weekend projects to make Jennifer's dream wedding a reality.
Ow.
Now I was not only heartbroken, but essentially broke, with credit card debt that would take years to pay off. But the emotional cost was even worse than the financial one. Every time I left my apartment, I could feel people staring, whispering, pointing. Brookhaven was exactly the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and my humiliation had become public entertainment. "That's James Martin," I heard someone whisper in the grocery store checkout line on Tuesday. His fiancée left him for her ex-boyfriend at their wedding. Can you imagine? I heard she ran straight into the other guy's arms. Another voice responded, "Right there at the altar. How embarrassing." The comments followed me everywhere. The gas station, the bank, the coffee shop where Jennifer and I used to have our Sunday morning dates. I started avoiding places where I might run into people I knew, which in a town like Brookhaven meant essentially becoming a hermit. Melissa checked on me every single day. She would call in the morning to make sure I was eating breakfast, text during her lunch break to see how I was holding up, and often stopped by in the evenings with takeout dinner and a willingness to help with whatever needed to be done. "You don't have to do this," I told her on Wednesday evening as she helped me pack up Jennifer's belongings that were still scattered throughout my apartment. "I'm sure your family isn't happy that you're spending time with me instead of supporting." Jennifer. Melissa's jaw tightened slightly. "My family's opinion isn't my primary concern right now. Besides, Jennifer made her choice, and she's dealing with the consequences of that choice. You didn't ask for any of this." It was true that Jennifer was facing her own fallout. Through Brookhaven's gossip network, I'd heard that Michael and Patricia Collins were furious with their eldest daughter. The wedding had cost them nearly as much as it had cost me, and Jennifer's dramatic exit had humiliated them in front of their entire social circle. Apparently, Jennifer and Robert had left town immediately after the cathedral incident, driving to some romantic getaway to reconnect and plan their future together. The casualness with which Jennifer had destroyed our 4-year relationship and then immediately started planning a new life with Robert was almost more painful than the initial betrayal. It suggested that what I'd thought was the love of my life had meant very little to her, that I'd been easily replaceable the moment something better came along. How could I have been so wrong about her? I asked Melissa one evening as we sorted through wedding gifts to return. For years, and I never saw this side of her, was I just completely blind? Melissa was quiet for a long moment, carefully wrapping a crystal vase that we'd received from Jennifer's college roommate. "I think Jennifer showed you the side of herself that she thought you wanted to see," she said finally. "She's always been good at being what people expect her to be. The problem is that she's never really figured out who she actually is underneath all that performance." Her insight surprised me. In all the years I'd known Melissa as Jennifer's younger sister, I'd never realized how perceptive she was about human nature. I'd always seen her as the quiet one, the background sister who let Jennifer shine. But now, I was discovering that she'd been observing and understanding things that had completely escaped my notice. "You really think she was performing for me?" I asked. "I think Jennifer has been performing for everyone her whole life," Melissa replied honestly. She learned early that being charming and vivacious and giving people what they wanted was the easiest way to get attention and approval. But I don't think she ever learned how to have genuine, authentic relationships. The observation stung because it rang so true. Looking back on our relationship, I could see now that Jennifer had always been on, always entertaining, always social, always focused on external validation. We'd rarely had deep, quiet conversations about our fears, our dreams, our authentic selves. Our relationship had been built on shared activities and social compatibility rather than genuine emotional intimacy. What does that say about me, that I fell for someone who was essentially performing our entire relationship? I asked, feeling a new wave of self-doubt. It says that you're a genuine person who assumed other people were being genuine too, Melissa said gently. That's not a character flaw, James. That's actually one of your best qualities. You trust people, you see the best in them, and you invest yourself completely in your relationships. Jennifer took advantage of that, but that doesn't make you foolish. It makes her selfish. As the days passed, I began to see Melissa in a completely different light. The woman I dismissed as Jennifer's quiet, unremarkable sister was actually incredibly insightful, steady, and wise. She had a dry sense of humor that I'd never noticed before, a way of cutting through emotional complexity to identify what really mattered. More importantly, she was the only person in my life who seemed to understand that I needed to process this betrayal on my own timeline. My parents kept calling with suggestions for how to get back out there and show Jennifer what she'd lost. Stanley and my other friends oscillated between wanting to trash talk Jennifer and trying to convince me that I was better off without her before I was ready to hear it, but Melissa never pushed. She simply showed up, day after day, offering practical help and quiet companionship without trying to fix my emotions or speed up my healing process. She listened when I needed to talk, sat in comfortable silence when I didn't, and somehow always seemed to know exactly what I needed on Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the wedding disaster. Melissa found me sitting on my couch, staring at the blank space on my wall where Jennifer's and my engagement photos used to hang. You took them down, she observed, settling beside me with 2 cups of coffee. I couldn't look at them anymore. I said, but now the empty wall feels almost worse. Transition periods are like that, Melissa said thoughtfully. The old life is gone, but the new life hasn't started yet. It's uncomfortable, but it's also where growth happens. I looked at her, this woman who had appeared beside me in my darkest moment and hadn't left my side since. Melissa, I need you to know how much your support has meant to me this week. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since the cathedral. You're stronger than you think. James, you're going to get through this, and when you do, you're going to be amazed at what you're capable of building for yourself. I didn't know it yet, but she was absolutely right. 2 weeks after the wedding disaster, finally returned to work at Pinnacle Construction. I'd hoped that getting back to my normal routine would help me move forward, but instead I felt more trapped than ever. The job that had once provided stability and satisfaction now felt like a dead end. A reminder of the life I'd built around someone else's expectations rather than my own dreams. Martin, good to have you back, my supervisor, Dave Richardson, said when I walked into the office Monday morning. I know things have been tough, but we've got 3 new projects that need your attention. Sometimes throwing yourself into work is the best medicine. But as I sat at my desk, reviewing project timelines and contractor schedules, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was going through the motions of someone else's life. Everything about my current situation, my job, my apartment, even my daily routines had been shaped by the future Jennifer and I had planned together. Now that future was gone, and I was left with the hollow shell of a life that no longer fit who I was becoming. Melissa noticed my struggle immediately. She'd been checking on me regularly, but when she called that Wednesday evening, something in my voice must have alerted her to my state of mind. You sound different, she said. Not sad different, but restless different. What's going on? I don't know, I admitted, pacing around my apartment with the phone pressed to my ear. I went back to work this week, thinking it would help me feel normal again, but instead, I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Everything I've been doing for the past few years was in service of a future that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Melissa said thoughtfully. Maybe this is an opportunity to figure out what you actually want, independent of what you thought Jennifer wanted. The conversation sparked something in me that I hadn't felt in years: curiosity about my own desires and ambitions. That weekend, Melissa suggested we take a drive outside Brookhaven, away from the familiar places that held so many memories of my old life. We ended up at Riverside Park, about 30 miles outside town, walking along trails that wound through dense forest and opened onto spectacular views of the valley below. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe deeply without the weight of public scrutiny and whispered conversations. "Tell me something," Melissa said as we sat on a bench overlooking the valley. "If money and other people's expectations weren't factors, what would you actually want to do with your life?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on being responsible, on building the stable life that Jennifer had said she wanted, that I'd stopped thinking about my own dreams years ago. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I mean, I've always been good at construction and project management, but I chose that field because it was practical and stable. I'm not sure I ever asked myself if it was what I actually wanted to do." Did you want to do when you were younger?" Melissa pressed gently. "Before you started making decisions based on what was practical?" The memory came back slowly, like something I'd buried and forgotten. "I used to want to start my own construction company," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "Not just managing other people's projects, but designing and building things myself." I had all these ideas about sustainable building practices, about creating homes that were beautiful and environmentally responsible. Melissa turned to look at me with renewed interest. "That sounds amazing. What happened to that dream?" "Life happened," I said with a shrug. "College debt, the need for steady income, meeting Jennifer, and wanting to provide stability for our future. It seemed more responsible to work for an established company than to take the risk of starting my own business." "But what if the risk is worth it?" Melissa asked. "What if playing it safe is actually the bigger risk? The risk of spending your entire life building someone else's vision instead of your own?" Her words hit me like a revelation. For years, I'd been telling myself that my job at Pinnacle was temporary. Eventually, I'd save enough money and gain enough experience to branch out on my own. But eventually had turned into a comfortable routine, and comfortable routines had a way of becoming permanent unless something forced a change. "I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately," Melissa continued. "Not just about your situation, but about my own career too. I'm good at financial analysis, but what I really love is helping people build businesses, helping them turn their ideas into sustainable enterprises." This was a side of Melissa I'd never seen before. In all the years I'd known her as Jennifer's sister, I'd never realized she had entrepreneurial ambitions of her own. "What kind of businesses?" I asked, genuinely curious. "All kinds," she said, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I've done consulting work on the side for a few small startups in Brookhaven. There's a couple who wanted to open a farm-table restaurant, a woman who designed sustainable clothing, a guy who invented a new type of water filtration system. I helped them with business plans, financial projections, market analysis, all the boring but crucial stuff that creative people often don't want to deal with." "That sounds incredible," I said, and I meant it. "Why haven't you made that your full-time career?" Melissa smiled ruefully. "Same reason you haven't started your own construction company, I suppose. Fear practicality, the comfort of a steady paycheck. But watching what happened to you and Jennifer made me realize that playing it safe doesn't guarantee anything. Life can change in an instant, and if you're not pursuing what actually fulfills you, you might wake up one day and realize you've wasted years building someone else's definition of success." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both of us processing the conversation. The autumn afternoon was crisp and clear, and the valley below us was painted in brilliant shades of red, orange, and gold. It felt symbolic somehow, the death of one season making space for the beauty of the next. "Can I ask you something?" Melissa said eventually. "Of course. What if we helped each other?" she said, her voice tentative but excited. "What if you explored starting your own construction business, and I helped you with the business planning side? I could handle the financial projections, market research, competitive analysis, all the stuff you'd need to make it legitimate. And maybe working on your project would give me the experience and confidence I need to transition into business consulting full-time." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. "Melissa, I don't have the capital to start a construction company. The wedding wiped out my savings, and I'm already carrying debt from that disaster. Capital can be raised if you have a solid business plan and a clear vision, Melissa said confidently. I work with investors every day at Brookhaven Investment Group. I know what they're looking for. And I know how to present a business case that gets attention. The question isn't whether you can afford to start your own company. The question is whether you can afford not to. Her confidence was infectious. The first time since the wedding disaster, I felt excited about something. Energized by possibility rather than weighed down by loss. You really think we could do this? I asked. Think we could do anything if we worked together, Melissa said simply. You have the technical skills, the industry experience, and the vision. I have the business knowledge and the financial expertise. Together, we could build something amazing. As we drove back to Brookhaven that evening, my mind was racing with possibilities. The construction industry was evolving rapidly, with increasing demand for sustainable building practices and energy-efficient homes. There was definitely a market for a company that specialized in environmentally responsible construction, especially in an area like Brookhaven, where affluent homeowners were increasingly conscious about their environmental impact. I want to do this, I said as Melissa pulled into my apartment complex. I want to explore this seriously. Good, she said with a grin, because I already started researching sustainable construction trends during my lunch breaks this week. I have some ideas about market positioning that I think you'll find interesting. As I watched Melissa drive away, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in my life. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Jennifer or Robert or the humiliation of the wedding disaster. I was thinking about the future. Not a future that someone else had planned for me, but a future that I was choosing to create. For myself, and for the first time. I wasn't creating that future alone. 6 months after that conversation at Riverside Park, Martin's Sustainable Construction was officially born. What had started as a desperate attempt to rebuild my life had evolved into something I never could have imagined. A thriving business that combined my technical expertise with Melissa's brilliant business acumen. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Those first few months had been a whirlwind of business plan development. Investor meetings, permit applications, and late nights spent around Melissa's kitchen table with laptops, calculators, and more coffee than was probably healthy for either of us. Melissa had been relentless in her research and preparation. She'd analyzed market trends in sustainable construction, identified our target demographic, and created financial projections that were both ambitious and realistic. More impressively, she'd managed to secure meetings with 3 different investor groups in the greater Brookhaven area who specialized in environmentally conscious business ventures. The market timing is perfect, she'd explained during one of our planning sessions, surrounded by spreadsheets and industry reports. There's increasing demand for sustainable building practices, especially among affluent homeowners who want to reduce their environmental impact without sacrificing luxury or aesthetics. You have the technical expertise to deliver what they want, and I can position us to capture that market segment. Our first real breakthrough came when Melissa arranged a meeting with Patricia Williams, a successful entrepreneur who had made her fortune in renewable energy and was now investing in other sustainable businesses. Patricia had been impressed not just by our business plan, but by the obvious synergy between Melissa's financial expertise and my construction background. What I like about your proposal, Patricia had said during our presentation at her downtown office, is that you're not just another construction company trying to jump on the green building bandwagon. You have a clear vision for how to integrate sustainability with quality craftsmanship, and your financial projections show you understand the business side as well as the technical side. Patricia had committed to a $75,000 investment in exchange for a small equity stake, providing the startup capital we needed to purchase equipment, secure proper licensing, and begin marketing our services. The day we signed that investment agreement, Melissa and I celebrated with dinner at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Brookhaven. I can't believe we actually did it, I said, raising my wine glass in a toast. 6 months ago, I was a broken-down project manager with no future. Tonight, I'm a business owner with a real plan and actual funding. You were never broken down, Melissa corrected, clinking her glass against mine. You were just temporarily redirected. There's a difference. Our first project came through an unexpected source. Stanley Green, my former best man, who had felt terrible about the wedding disaster and wanted to help in any way he could. His sister and brother-in-law were building a custom home in Maplewood, and were specifically looking for a contractor who specialized in sustainable building practices. "I know things have been complicated between us since the wedding," Stanley had said when he called with the referral. "But I've seen what you and Melissa have been building together, and I think you're exactly what Sarah and Tom are looking for." The project was a dream assignment, a 4,000 square foot custom home with a budget that allowed us to showcase all of our sustainable building techniques. Solar panels, energy-efficient windows, reclaimed hardwood floors, and a gray water recycling. A system that would reduce the home's environmental impact by nearly 40%. Melissa handled all the client communications, contract negotiations, and project scheduling, while I focused on the technical aspects and quality control. Working together felt effortless in a way that surprised both of us. Where I was detail-oriented and methodical, she was strategic and forward-thinking. Where she sometimes got overwhelmed by technical specifications, I could break down complex building processes into manageable components. "You two work together like you've been business partners for years," Sarah Henderson, our client, commented one afternoon as Melissa and I reviewed the installation timeline for the solar panel system. "It's really impressive to see that kind of professional chemistry." The comment made both Melissa and me slightly uncomfortable, but not because it was untrue. The reality was that our working relationship had become the most natural and productive partnership I'd ever experienced. We anticipated each other's needs, complemented each other's strengths, and communicated with an ease that felt almost telepathic. As the Henderson project progressed, word began to spread through Brookhaven's affluent neighborhoods about the quality work Martin's sustainable construction was delivering. We completed the Henderson home 2 weeks ahead of schedule and $3,000 under budget, which was almost unheard of in custom construction. "James, I have to tell you, this is the smoothest construction project I've ever been involved with," Tom Henderson said during our final walkthrough. "The attention to detail, the communication, the way you handled every issue that came up, it's been exceptional. I can bet we'll be recommending you to everyone we know." True to his word, Tom's recommendation led to 3 more project inquiries within 2 weeks. Melissa had to create a waiting list for consultations, and we began discussing the possibility of hiring our first employee. Sooner than we'd originally planned, our second major project came from Patricia Williams herself, who wanted to add a sustainable guest house to her property outside Brookhaven. This project was even more ambitious than the Henderson home. It's featuring cutting-edge geothermal heating and cooling systems, walls made from recycled materials, and a rainwater collection system that would make the guest house completely water independent. "I want this to be a showcase for what's possible in sustainable construction," Patricia told us during our initial consultation. "Budget isn't the primary concern. Innovation and environmental impact are. I want other wealthy homeowners to see this and realize they don't have to choose between luxury and sustainability." The Patricia Williams project elevated our reputation to an entirely new level. Local magazines wrote articles about our innovative building techniques, and we were invited to speak at a sustainable living conference in the state capitol. Melissa handled the media relations with characteristic professionalism, while I focused on the technical presentations. 6 months ago, neither of us could have imagined this, Melissa said one evening as we reviewed our project calendar over dinner. We'd fallen into a routine of working late and then grabbing food together, partly for efficiency, but increasingly because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," I admitted. "Everything is going so well that it feels almost too good to be true." "Or maybe," Melissa said with a smile, "this is what happens when you stop living your life according to other people's expectations and start building something that's authentically yours." Authentically yours. She was right. And I was beginning to understand that the wedding disaster hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of my real life. The life I was building with Melissa felt more genuine and fulfilling than anything I'd experienced with Jennifer. Where my relationship with Jennifer had been based on shared social activities and external validation, my partnership with Melissa was built on mutual respect, complementary strengths, and a shared vision for creating something meaningful. By our 6-month anniversary, Martin Sustainable Construction had completed 4 major projects, generated over $250,000 in revenue, and built a reputation that had clients calling us from as far away as the state capital. We'd hired 2 part-time employees and were considering expanding into commercial, sustainable construction. More importantly, I discovered capabilities and confidence I never knew I possessed. Leading client meetings, managing complex projects, making strategic business decisions had revealed strengths that years of working for other people had never allowed me to develop. You know what I realized today? Melissa said as we walked. Through our latest project site, reviewing progress on a sustainable renovation in downtown Brookhaven, 6 months ago, you were convinced that Jennifer leaving you was the worst thing that could happen. But watching you now, seeing how you've grown and what you've built, I think it might have been the best thing that ever happened to you. Looking around at the construction site, at the innovative building techniques we were implementing, at the satisfied expression on our client's face, I realized she was absolutely right. The man standing here today was stronger, more confident, and more fulfilled than the man who had been left at the altar 9 months ago, and the woman standing beside me had been instrumental in making that transformation possible. Just when everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place, disaster struck in the most unexpected way possible. It was a Tuesday morning in early March, 9 months after the wedding catastrophe, when I received the phone call that would nearly destroy everything Melissa and I had built together. "James, we have a problem," came the voice of David Chen. Our largest client and the owner of a $180,000 sustainable housing development project that represented nearly 60% of our current revenue. "I need you to come to my office immediately. Bring your business partner." The tone in David's voice made my stomach drop. David Chen was a successful real estate developer who had hired us to build 3 custom, eco-friendly homes in an upscale subdivision outside Brookhaven. The project was our biggest contract to date. Its success was crucial for our company's growth, trajectory, and financial stability. Melissa and I arrived at Chen Development's offices 30 minutes later, both of us trying to maintain professional composure while internally panicking about what could have gone wrong. David's usually warm demeanor was replaced by a cold, business-like expression that immediately put us on edge. "Sit down," David said without preamble. "I'm going to be direct with you because I respect what you've built, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. I've received some information about your company that's making me reconsider our contract." My heart began racing. "What kind of information?" David slid a folder across his desk toward us. "Yesterday, I was contacted by someone claiming to have insider knowledge about Martin Sustainable Construction's business practices. According to this person, your company has been cutting corners on environmental certifications, using non-sustainable materials while charging premium prices for eco-friendly construction, and misrepresenting your qualifications to secure contracts. The accusations were absolutely devastating and completely false." Melissa and I exchanged shocked glances as we opened the folder to find printed emails, photographs of our construction sites taken from suspicious angles, and what appeared to be falsified documentation suggesting we'd been deceiving our clients about our sustainable building practices. "David, these allegations are completely untrue," Melissa said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Every material we use is properly certified. Every environmental claim we make is documented and verified. We can provide complete transparency about our supply chains, our certifications, everything." "I hoped you'd say that," David replied. "But the person who contacted me seemed very knowledgeable about your business operations. They knew specific details about our contract, about your other projects, about your company's financial structure. This wasn't some random competitor making vague accusations." A cold realization began creeping over me. "David, can you tell us anything about the person who contacted you? Did they give you a name?" "They did," David said, checking his notes. "Jennifer Collins. She said she used to be engaged to you, James, and that she felt morally obligated to warn my company about business practices that could damage our reputation." The room seemed to spin around me. Jennifer, after 9 months of silence, after running away with Robert and abandoning everyone who had invested in our relationship, she had reappeared to sabotage the new life I'd built. The cruelty and vindictiveness of it was breathtaking. "Jennifer Collins is my ex-fiancée who left me at our wedding altar," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "She abandoned me in front of 200 people and then disappeared from Brookhaven with her ex-boyfriend. She has no knowledge of my current business practices and certainly no moral authority to make accusations about my professional integrity." David's expression shifted slightly, showing the first sign that he might be reconsidering the source of these allegations. "She mentioned the wedding situation, actually. She said that your humiliation and financial losses from that event had driven you to desperate measures in your new business." Melissa stood up abruptly, her professional composure finally cracking. "Mr. Chen, with all due respect, this is clearly a malicious attempt to destroy James's reputation and our business. Jennifer Collins has been completely absent from James's life since she abandoned him. She has no access to our business records, no knowledge of our practices, and certainly no credibility as a source of information about our company's integrity." "Then you won't mind if I bring in an independent auditor to verify all of your environmental certifications and supply chain documentation?" David asked. "Absolutely not," I replied immediately. "We welcome any audit you want to conduct. Business practices are completely transparent and above board." But even as I said the words, I knew the damage was already done. An audit would take weeks, during which David would likely suspend our contract payments. Other clients would hear rumors about the investigation. Our reputation, the foundation of everything we'd built, would be severely damaged, regardless of what the audit ultimately revealed. As we left David's office, Melissa and I drove in stunned silence back to our temporary office space. Above Richardson's hardware store, the magnitude of what Jennifer had done was still sinking in. She hadn't just attacked me personally, she had attacked Melissa, our employees, our clients, and our entire future. "How did she get so much information about our business?" Melissa asked once we were alone in our office. The details she provided to David were too specific to be random guesses. I was already pulling up our company's online presence, checking our website, social media accounts, and any public records that might be accessible. Most of the information about our projects is available through building permits, business, licensing records, and the articles that were written about us. Someone with enough motivation could piece together a lot of details from public sources. But as I continued investigating, I discovered something even more disturbing. Jennifer hadn't just contacted David Chen. Over the past week, she had systematically reached out to 3 of our other major clients, our materials suppliers, and even the investment group that had provided our startup funding. She had created a coordinated campaign designed to destroy our business from multiple angles simultaneously. The next few days were a nightmare of damage control. Melissa and I spent endless hours on phone calls with clients, providing documentation to prove our legitimacy and arranging meetings to address concerns that Jennifer's accusations had raised. Our lawyer, Margaret Foster, advised us that while we could potentially sue Jennifer for defamation, the legal process would be lengthy and expensive. It might not be worth pursuing given that Jennifer and Robert had apparently left Brookhaven again after launching their attack. "The goal here isn't to punish her," Margaret explained during an emergency consultation. "The goal is to save your business and your reputation. Focus your energy on proving your legitimacy rather than on revenge." The financial impact was immediate and severe. David Chen suspended our contract payments pending the audit results. 2 other clients postponed planned projects, citing concerns about our company's reliability. Our materials suppliers, spooked by Jennifer's accusations, demanded cash payments rather than extending us the credit terms we'd been using to manage our cash flow. Within a week, we went from a thriving business with a 6-month project backlog to a company struggling to meet payroll and basic expenses. The stress was overwhelming, and for the first time since we'd started working together, Melissa and I found ourselves snapping at each other over minor issues. "Maybe we should have seen this coming," Melissa said one evening as we worked late, trying to compile documentation for the audit. "Jennifer's always been vindictive when she doesn't get what she wants. I should have anticipated that she might try something like this." "How could you have anticipated this?" I replied, exhaustion making my voice sharper than I intended. No reasonable person expects their ex to launch a coordinated business sabotage campaign 9 months after leaving them. "I'm not just your business partner, James," Melissa said quietly. "I'm Jennifer's sister. I've known her manipulative tendencies my entire life. Maybe I should have warned you that she might not be finished with you just because she disappeared from Brookhaven." The comment hit me like a revelation I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Throughout our partnership, I'd been so focused on how different Melissa was from Jennifer that I'd almost forgotten they were related. Now, seeing the pain and guilt in Melissa's eyes, I realized that Jennifer's attack wasn't just threatening our business. It was forcing Melissa to choose between her loyalty to me and her family relationships. "Melissa, this isn't your fault," I said, my anger deflating as I saw how much she was hurting. "You're not responsible for your sister's actions. But I am responsible for not protecting you from them," she replied, tears forming in her eyes. "I know Jennifer better than anyone, and I should have seen this coming, should have prepared you for the possibility that she might try to destroy what we've built." The vulnerability in her voice broke something open in my chest. For months, Melissa had been my rock, my steady partner who never wavered in her support or confidence. Seeing her blame herself for Jennifer's cruelty made me realize how much I'd come to depend on her strength, and how much I cared about her pain. "Listen to me," I said, moving closer to her. "Everything good in my life right now exists because of your support, your expertise, and your belief in me. Jennifer can attack our business, but she can't take away what we've built together. We're going to get through this, and we're going to be stronger because of it." Melissa looked up at me with tears in her eyes, and for a moment, the professional boundaries we'd carefully maintained seemed to dissolve completely. We were no longer just business partners dealing with a crisis. We were two people who cared deeply about each other, facing down someone who wanted to destroy everything we'd created together. "James," she whispered, and I could see in her expression that we were both thinking the same thing. Our partnership had become something much more than professional collaboration, and Jennifer's attack had crystallized feelings we'd been trying to ignore. But before either of us could say anything more, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia Williams, our primary investor. "James," Patricia's voice was tense when I answered. "I need to see you and Melissa in my office first thing tomorrow morning. We need to discuss the allegations that have been made against your company and what they mean for our investment relationship." As I hung up the phone, Melissa and I looked at each other with the shared understanding that everything we'd worked for was hanging by a thread. Jennifer's revenge wasn't just threatening our business, it was threatening to destroy the most important relationship in my life before it had even begun. The next morning, Melissa and I walked into Patricia Williams's office carrying 3 thick binders of documentation that we'd spent the entire night compiling. We had certifications for every material we'd ever used, photographs documenting every stage of our construction processes, and testimonials from suppliers, subcontractors, and satisfied clients. If Patricia wanted proof of our integrity, we were prepared to provide overwhelming evidence. "I'll be honest with you both," Patricia said, as we took our seats across from her mahogany desk. "The allegations that have been made against your company are serious, and they've put me in a difficult position as an investor. I need to understand exactly what's happening here before I can make any decisions about our ongoing relationship." Melissa took the lead, her voice steady and professional, despite the exhaustion that was evident in her face. "Patricia, we understand your concerns completely, and we're prepared to provide absolute transparency about every aspect of our business operations. But before we dive into the documentation, there's something important you need to know about the source of these allegations." She proceeded to explain Jennifer's history with me, the wedding abandonment, and the vindictive nature of the accusations. As Melissa spoke, I watched Patricia's expression shift from concern to interest to what looked like barely contained anger on our behalf. "Let me understand this correctly," Patricia said when Melissa finished. "The person making these accusations is your ex-fiancée who publicly humiliated you, has had no contact with your business operations, and has no professional expertise in construction or environmental certification?" "That's correct," I confirmed. "We can prove that every single one of her allegations is false." What followed was the most thorough business presentation of my life, Melissa and I walked Patricia through every project we'd completed, every certification we'd obtained, and every environmental claim we'd ever made. We showed her detailed photographs of our construction processes, copies of our supply chain documentation, and testimonials from clients who had been so satisfied with our work that they'd referred multiple new customers to us. "This is remarkable," Patricia said, reviewing our portfolio of completed projects. "Not only are your environmental credentials legitimate, but your actual performance exceeds most of the claims you've made in your marketing materials. You've consistently delivered projects ahead of schedule and under budget while maintaining exceptional quality standards." But then Patricia surprised us with an unexpected question. "Have you considered that this attack might actually be an opportunity?" Melissa and I exchanged confused glances. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" I asked. Patricia leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. "Think about it. Jennifer's accusations have forced you to compile the most comprehensive documentation of your business practices that any construction company could possibly have. You now have irrefutable proof of your integrity, your expertise, and your results. That's incredibly valuable in an industry where trust and reputation are everything." She was right, and as she continued speaking, I began to see where she was heading with this logic. "More importantly," Patricia continued, "this situation has revealed how much demand there is for truly sustainable construction services. The fact that multiple clients were concerned about potentially working with a company that wasn't legitimately eco-friendly shows how much the market values authentic environmental responsibility." Patricia opened her laptop and pulled up what appeared to be a business presentation. "I've been thinking about this since yesterday, and I have a proposal for you. Instead of just defending against these false accusations, what if we used this situation to launch an expansion that would make Martin Sustainable Construction the premier eco-friendly builder in the entire region?" The proposal she outlined was breathtaking in its scope and ambition. Patricia wanted to triple her investment in our company, funding an expansion that would allow us to hire additional crews, open a second office in the state capital, and pursue commercial construction projects that could generate millions in revenue. "The market research supports this expansion," Patricia explained, showing us projected demand for sustainable construction over the next 5 years. Environmental consciousness is moving from a niche preference to a mainstream requirement, especially among affluent clients who can afford premium construction services. But the most brilliant part of Patricia's proposal was her marketing strategy. Instead of hiding from Jennifer's accusations, we would address them head-on by launching a transparency campaign that would showcase our rigorous environmental standards and set a new industry benchmark for sustainable construction practices. "Create a documentary-style marketing campaign that shows your entire construction process," Patricia explained. "Every material sourced, every environmental standard met, every innovation implemented. We'll turn your commitment to transparency into a competitive advantage that no other construction company can match." Melissa was practically glowing with excitement as Patricia outlined the details. This wasn't just a rescue from Jennifer's sabotage, it was an opportunity to build something bigger and more meaningful than either of us had ever imagined. "Patricia, this is incredible," Melissa said, "but the level of investment you're proposing? Are you sure you want to take that kind of risk on us?" Patricia smiled. "Melissa, I've been investing in businesses for over 20 years, and I've learned to recognize authentic partnerships when I see them. What you and James have built together isn't just a successful business. It's a genuine collaboration between two people who bring out the best in each other's capabilities." Her observation hit both Melissa and me with unexpected intensity. Throughout this crisis, as we'd worked together to defend our business and our reputation, something fundamental had shifted between us. The professional partnership that had begun as mutual convenience had evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. "In fact," Patricia continued, "I'd like to propose that we restructure the company as a formal partnership with both of you holding equal equity stakes. Your skill sets are so complementary that it doesn't make sense for one of you to be considered the junior partner." The offer was more than generous. It was transformational. Not only would it provide the capital we needed to expand, but it would formalize what had already become the most important professional and personal relationship in both of our lives. We need some time to discuss this, I said, my voice barely steady as the magnitude of the opportunity sank in. Of course, Patricia replied. Take all the time you need. But James, Melissa, I want you both to understand that what Jennifer intended as destruction has actually revealed your strength. The fact that you faced this crisis together and emerged with your integrity intact tells me everything I need to know about your partnership and your potential. As we left Patricia's office, Melissa and I were both quiet, overwhelmed by the dramatic reversal of our circumstances. In less than 24 hours, we'd gone from facing the potential destruction of our business to being offered an expansion opportunity that could make us one of the most successful construction companies in the region. Can you believe this? Melissa asked as we sat in my truck in Patricia's parking lot. I'm still processing it, I admitted. Yesterday, I thought Jennifer was going to destroy everything we'd built. Today, we're being offered the chance to build something even bigger, James, Melissa said, turning to face me with an expression that was both vulnerable and determined. There's something I need to say, and I think this crisis has shown me that we can't keep pretending it's not true. My heart began racing as I saw the intention in her eyes. What we have together, she continued, it's not just a business partnership anymore. Maybe it never was. I've been trying to maintain professional boundaries because I didn't want to complicate our working relationship, but watching how we handled this crisis together, I realized that we're already far beyond professional collaboration, are the words I'd been wanting to say for months finally came out. Melissa, you're the most important person in my life. Everything good that's happened to me in the past year happened because you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I'm in love with you, and I have been for longer than I've been willing to admit. She smiled, tears forming in her eyes. I'm in love with you too. And I think it's time we stop trying to separate our personal and professional lives, because they're the same thing now. As I leaned over to kiss her, I realized that Jennifer's attempt to destroy my life had actually completed my transformation. The broken, humiliated man who had been abandoned at the altar was gone, replaced by someone who was confident, successful, and deeply loved by a woman who was his true equal in every way. Jennifer had intended to break me, but instead, she had given me the final push I needed to claim the life I was meant to live. 8 months later, Melissa and I returned to Brookhaven as completely different people than we'd been when we left. Martin's Sustainable Construction had exploded into one of the most sought-after eco-friendly building companies in the region. With projects spanning 3 states and a waiting list that stretched 6 months into the future, we'd been featured on the cover of Sustainable Living magazine, spoken at environmental conferences across the country, and built a reputation that had clients flying in from major cities to hire us for their dream homes. But more importantly, Melissa and I had become partners in every sense of the word. We'd gotten married 6 months earlier in a simple, intimate ceremony at Riverside Park, the same place where we'd first talked about our business dreams. Our wedding had been everything Jennifer and I had never been: authentic, peaceful, and focused on the commitment we were making to each other rather than on impressing other people. Now, we were back in Brookhaven for the dedication ceremony of our latest and most prestigious project, the complete sustainable renovation of the historic Brookhaven Community Center. It's a $2.3 million project that would serve as a model for environmental restoration throughout the region. The project had been commissioned by the City Council and funded by a coalition of local businesses and environmental groups who wanted to showcase what was possible when sustainability met historic preservation. Are you ready for this? Asked as we pulled up to the community center in my new Tesla Model S, a far cry from the beat-up pickup truck I'd been driving when Jennifer left me. She looked absolutely stunning in her navy blue business suit, her hair perfectly styled, carrying herself with the confidence of a successful entrepreneur who had earned every bit of her success. More than ready, I replied, adjusting my tie and looking at the crowd that had gathered for the dedication ceremony. The parking lot was filled with local officials, business leaders, and community members who had come to celebrate what was being hailed as a groundbreaking achievement in sustainable construction. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were being honored in the same town where I'd been publicly humiliated just over 2 years ago. Then I'd been a broken project manager with no future. Now I was being recognized as a pioneering entrepreneur whose innovative building techniques were being studied and replicated across the country, Mayor Thompson took the podium first. The crowd of nearly 300 people who had gathered in the community center's newly renovated main hall. "Today, we're not just celebrating the completion of a construction project," he announced. "We're celebrating a vision of what's possible when local talent, environmental responsibility, and community investment come together." As the mayor continued his remarks, I noticed a familiar figure standing near the back of the crowd. My breath caught for a moment as I recognized Jennifer, looking significantly different than she had 2 years ago. Her once vibrant appearance had been replaced by something tired and worn. She was standing alone, repeatedly checking her phone, and seemed uncomfortable in her own skin. "Is that?" Melissa whispered, following my gaze. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's Jennifer." But seeing Jennifer didn't trigger the emotional reaction I might have expected. Instead of anger, hurt, or even satisfaction, I felt something closer to indifference. The woman who had once been the center of my universe now seemed like a stranger from someone else's life. When Mayor Thompson called Melissa and me to the podium to address the crowd, we walked forward together with complete confidence. This was our moment, our achievement, and our community recognizing what we'd built together. 2 years ago, I began looking out at the crowd. I was a different person living a different life. I thought I knew what success looked like, what happiness meant, and what kind of future I wanted to build. Sometimes life has a way of destroying everything you think you want in order to give you everything you actually need. I talked about our commitment to sustainable building practices, about the innovative techniques we'd use to restore the community center while reducing its environmental impact by over 50%, and about our vision for making Brookhaven a model for environmentally responsible development. But the most meaningful part of my speech was when I talked about partnership. "The most important thing I've learned is that real success isn't something you achieve alone," I said, looking directly at Melissa. "It's something you build with someone who shares your values, challenges you to be better, and stands beside you through every obstacle. My partner, my wife, and my best friend, Melissa Adams Martin, has been instrumental in every achievement our company has made." When Melissa took the microphone, her speech was equally powerful, but focused on the community impact of our work. She talked about job creation, environmental education, and the economic benefits of sustainable development. But what impressed me most was how naturally she commanded the attention of the entire crowd, politicians, business leaders, and community members all hanging on her every word. "Sustainability isn't just about building techniques," Melissa concluded. "It's about building communities, relationships, and futures that can endure and thrive. That's what we've tried to create here in Brookhaven, and it's what we hope to continue building for years to come." The applause was thunderous, and as we stepped down from the podium, we were immediately surrounded by people wanting to congratulate us, discuss potential projects, and learn more about our company's expansion plans. The Regional Economic Development Director approached us about establishing a permanent office in Brookhaven to serve as our headquarters for projects throughout the tri-state area. But in the midst of all the congratulations and business discussions, I noticed Jennifer making her way through the crowd toward us. She looked nervous, hesitant, but determined to speak with us. "James," she said when she finally reached us, her voice uncertain. "Congratulations. This is really incredible what you've accomplished." "Thank you," I replied simply, my tone polite but not encouraging further conversation. "I was wondering if we could talk privately for a few minutes," Jennifer continued. "There are some things I'd like to say to you, to both of you. Melissa stepped closer to me, not in a protective way, but in a way that made it clear we were a united front. "Of course," Melissa said graciously. "Well, it will need to be brief. We have several more meetings this afternoon. Found a quiet corner of the community center where we could talk without being overheard by the other guests." Jennifer seemed to struggle with how to begin, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "I know this is probably too little too late," Jennifer said finally, "but I need to apologize for what I did to your business last year. The accusations I made, the people I contacted, it was vindictive and cruel. And I'm ashamed of myself for stooping to that level." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving motivation. But what I saw instead was genuine remorse and regret. "What happened to you and Robert?" Melissa asked, her tone neutral but curious. Jennifer's face crumpled slightly. We broke up 8 months ago. Turns out that destroying someone else's life isn't a great foundation for building your own happiness. Robert couldn't handle the guilt of what we'd done, and I couldn't handle the person I'd become. We made each other miserable. She looked directly at me, tears forming in her eyes. James, I know there's no excuse for what I did to you at our wedding, and certainly no excuse for trying to destroy your business. I was angry and hurt and confused, but that doesn't justify the pain I caused you. Jennifer, I said gently, I appreciate your apology, and I forgive you. But you need to understand that what you did both at the wedding and with the business sabotage, that wasn't just a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. That was a pattern of putting your own immediate desires ahead of everyone else's well-being. Jennifer nodded, accepting the harsh truth of my assessment. You're right. And seeing what you've built together, seeing how happy you both are, I realized that I never deserved what we had. I was selfish and immature, and I took your love for granted. Important thing, Melissa interjected, is that you recognize those patterns and work to change them. James and I don't carry anger towards you, but we also can't be part of your life going forward. It was a perfectly diplomatic response, accepting Jennifer's apology while maintaining clear boundaries about future contact. I understand, Jennifer said quietly. I just wanted you both to know that I'm sorry and that I'm genuinely happy. You found each other. You belong together in a way that James and I never did. After Jennifer walked away, Melissa and I stood together for a moment, processing the unexpected encounter. How do you feel? Melissa asked, studying my expression. Honestly? Grateful, I said, surprising myself with the answer. Grateful that she showed me what I didn't want. Grateful that her betrayal led me to you. And grateful that we've built something so much better than what I thought I wanted. No regrets? Melissa asked with a smile. Only one, I replied, pulling her closer. I regret that it took me so long to realize that the woman I was supposed to be with was standing right beside me the whole time. As we rejoined the dedication ceremony, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. 2 years ago, I'd been a heartbroken, humiliated man with no clear direction. Today, I was a successful entrepreneur, devoted husband, and respected member of my community. But more than that, I was genuinely happy in a way that felt sustainable and authentic. The man who had been abandoned at the altar was gone, replaced by someone who understood the difference between love and performance, between partnership and dependency, between building a life and simply going through the motions of one. And the woman beside me wasn't just my wife or my business partner. She was the person who had helped me discover who I was capable of becoming when I stopped trying to be who someone else wanted me to be. The testing was complete. We had faced our past, demonstrated our growth, and emerged stronger than ever. Jennifer's final appearance in our lives had only confirmed what we already knew. We had built something real, something lasting, and something infinitely better than what had been destroyed. 5 years later, I stood in the grand ballroom of the East Side Country Club, the very same venue where Jennifer and I were supposed to have held our wedding reception. But instead of celebrating a marriage that was never meant to be, I was here for the annual Brookhaven Entrepreneur Awards, where Melissa and I were being honored as Business Partners of the Year. The irony wasn't lost on me. The last time I'd been in this building, I was a heartbroken man dealing with canceled wedding arrangements and crushing debt. Tonight, I was here as the co-founder of Martin's Sustainable Construction, a company that now employed 47 people across 3 states and had just been featured in Architectural Digest as one of the most innovative construction firms in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, announced Sarah Richardson, the president of the Brookhaven Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome this year's recipients of the Business Partnership Excellence Award, James and Melissa Adams Martin. Sustainable Construction. As Melissa and I walked to the podium together, I caught sight of our table where our parents sat beaming with pride. My mother was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue just as she had at my almost wedding 5 years ago, but these were tears of joy rather than heartbreak. Beside our parents sat our newest addition, 3-month-old Emma Martin, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, blissfully unaware that her parents were being celebrated as one of the most successful business partnerships in the region. Emma's arrival 6 months ago had been the final piece of a life I never could have imagined when Jennifer left me at the altar. Becoming parents had only deepened the partnership between Melissa and me, showing us new dimensions of trust, teamwork, and shared purpose that we'd never experienced before. 5 years ago, I began looking out at the crowd of 300 business leaders and community members. My life fell apart in the most public and humiliating way possible. At the time, it felt like the end of my world.
Out tonight.
I stand here understanding that it was actually the beginning of my real life. I talked about our company's growth, from a desperate startup born out of personal crisis to a thriving enterprise that had completed over 200 sustainable building projects. I spoke about our commitment to environmental responsibility, our investment in local communities, and our belief that business success should contribute to, rather than detract from, the well-being of the world around us. But the most important part of my speech was when I talked about partnership, both in business and in life. The most valuable lesson I've learned, I said, looking directly at Melissa, is that real success isn't measured by what you achieve, but by who you become in the process of achieving it. The woman standing beside me didn't just help me build a business, she helped me discover who I was capable of being when I stopped trying to be who someone else wanted me to be. When Melissa took the microphone, her remarks focused on something that had become increasingly important to both of us: using our success to help others who are facing their own moments of crisis and transformation. Over the past 2 years, Melissa explained, James and I have started what we call the Second Chances Initiative. We provide business mentorship, startup funding, and emotional support to people who are rebuilding their lives after major setbacks, divorce, job loss, illness, or other life-changing events that force them to reimagine their futures. The Second Chances Initiative had grown out of our own experience of transformation and our recognition that many people facing crisis lack the support systems necessary to turn their setbacks into comebacks. We'd helped launch 17 new businesses, provided scholarships for career retraining programs, and created a network of mentors who understood what it meant to rebuild from the ground up. We've learned that some of the most innovative, resilient, and successful people are those who've had to completely reconstruct their lives, Melissa continued. Crisis forces you to question everything you thought you wanted and discover what you actually need. That process, painful as it is, often leads to something far better than what was lost. Our latest project through the initiative was perhaps our most ambitious yet: a partnership with Brookhaven University to create the Adams Martin Center for Entrepreneurial Resilience, a program that would provide resources, mentorship, and funding for people starting businesses after major life transitions. The center would officially open next month. It's funded by a $2.3 million donation from our company's profits over the past 3 years. After the awards ceremony, Melissa and I found ourselves surrounded by well-wishers, potential clients, and other entrepreneurs who wanted to learn about our business model and our approach to sustainable construction. But the conversation that meant the most to me came from an unexpected source: James. The voice belonged to Stanley Green, my former best man, who I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years. We'd lost touch after the wedding disaster, partly because I'd been so focused on rebuilding my life, and partly because our friendship had been built around my relationship with Jennifer. "Stanley," I said warmly, genuinely happy to see him. "How are you?" "I'm good, man." "Really good," Stanley replied, but there was something hesitant in his expression. "Listen, I know this might be weird, but I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "Thank me for what?" Stanley glanced around to make sure we had some privacy before continuing. "About 6 months after your wedding, situation. My girlfriend at the time left me for her ex-boyfriend. Sound familiar?" I felt a pang of sympathy for my old friend. "Stanley, I'm sorry, I had no idea." "The thing is," Stanley continued, "watching how you handled what Jennifer did to you, seeing how you picked yourself up and built something amazing with Melissa, it gave me a roadmap for how to handle my own situation. Instead of falling apart, I used it as motivation to figure out what I actually wanted from life. Stanley went on to explain that his girlfriend's betrayal had prompted him to leave his dead-end sales job and pursue his real passion, photography. He'd spent the past 4 years building a wedding photography business that was now one of the most sought after in the region. "I know it sounds crazy," Stanley said, "but watching you turn the worst day of your life into the foundation for the best life you could have imagined, it showed me that getting destroyed doesn't have to mean staying destroyed." The conversation with Stanley was a perfect example of why Melissa and I had started the Second Chances initiative. We discovered that our story resonated with people facing their own crises, that sharing our experience honestly, including the pain, the doubt, and the gradual process of rebuilding, could provide hope and practical guidance for others. Later that evening, as Melissa and I drove home through the familiar streets of Brookhaven, I reflected on how completely my relationship with this town had transformed. 5 years ago, these streets had been filled with whispers about my humiliation. Tonight, they were filled with congratulations for our success and recognition of our contributions to the community. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Jennifer hadn't left you at the altar?" Melissa asked as we pulled into the driveway of our custom-built sustainable home in Maplewood, the same neighborhood where I'd once planned to live with Jennifer, but in a house that was entirely our own creation. "Never," I replied without hesitation. "Not because I'm angry with her or because I want to forget that period of my life, but because I genuinely can't imagine wanting any life other than the one we've built together." It was true. The life Melissa and I had created together was so much richer, more fulfilling, and more authentic than anything I'd thought I wanted with Jennifer. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, shared values, complementary strengths, and genuine partnership, rather than the performance and social expectations that had characterized my previous relationship. As we quietly checked on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in the nursery we'd designed together, I marveled at the completeness of our life. Our daughter would grow up in a home built by her parents' hands, surrounded by evidence of what was possible when two people committed to bringing out the best in each other. "You know what I realized tonight?" Melissa said as we settled into bed, the moonlight streaming through the energy-efficient windows we'd specially designed for our bedroom. "What's that?" "Jennifer did us the biggest favor of our lives," Melissa said thoughtfully. "Not just by leaving you, but by doing it in such a dramatic, public way that you had no choice but to completely rebuild your life from scratch." She was right. If Jennifer had simply broken up with me privately, I might have spent years trying to win her back, or wondering what I could have done differently. The public humiliation had been devastating, but it had also been definitive. There was no going back, no possibility of reconciliation, no room for denial about what kind of person she really was. "Sometimes I think about all the people we've helped through the Second Chances initiative," I said, "and I realize that our story isn't unique. It's actually pretty common for people's lives to be completely redirected by events that seem catastrophic at the time. That's why I love what we're doing with the center at the university," Melissa replied. "We're not just helping people start businesses. We're helping them understand that getting knocked down isn't the end of their story. It's often the beginning of the story they were actually meant to live." As I drifted off to sleep that night, holding the hand of the woman who had transformed my greatest defeat into my greatest victory, I thought about the man I'd been 5 years ago. That version of myself, heartbroken, humiliated, financially devastated, seemed like a character from someone else's life. The journey from that altar to this bedroom had taught me that resilience wasn't just about surviving difficult circumstances. Real resilience was about allowing those circumstances to reveal strengths you didn't know you possessed, to clarify values you'd never properly examined, and to lead you toward people and possibilities you never would have discovered otherwise. Jennifer's betrayal had stripped away everything I thought I wanted, leaving me free to discover everything I actually needed. Her cruel attempt to destroy my business had forced us to build something even stronger and more successful than we'd originally envisioned. Even her vindictive nature had ultimately served our purposes, showing us by contrast what authentic love and partnership actually looked like tomorrow. Melissa and I would wake up in the home we'd built together, check on the daughter we were raising together, and continue growing the business we'd created together. We'd work on expanding the Second Chances initiative, mentor other entrepreneurs facing their own challenges, and contribute to our community in ways that reflected our values and our commitment to each other. But tonight, I simply felt grateful. Grateful for the betrayal that had set me free, grateful for the crisis that had revealed my strength, and most of all, grateful for the woman who had stood beside me through every step of the journey from destruction to triumph. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is actually the best thing that hasn't happened yet. You just have to be brave enough to let it unfold. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.